Hello, my name is Chris Blask. I'm the Vice President of Strategy with Cybeats. Thanks for joining us today. With me today is Eric Hutto, who I met when he was President and COO of Unisys, has an astounding career as a top executive in large organizations, and is recently transitioning into a new role. Thank you, Eric. Where are you in the world today?
I'm in Dallas, Texas, Chris, where
I'm
it's
glad.
like 30 degrees and snowing again. So we're getting all kinds of interesting weather.
Well, Sam Clemens and I here in the actually we were in the Boca Chica channel. We're now in the Kemp channel off Cudjoe Key. There's a Navy blimp watching the ocean around us, and it's hot and windy. So it's not exactly Dallas at the moment. So, as I say, thanks for joining us. And as we've developed in this conversation, we're looking at transparency. We're a bunch of cyber folks. We're cybersecurity folks, and I think we're at this stage where we have yet another cybersecurity event happening that actually matters for more than encryption geeks. It's actually about business and efficiency and so forth. So, looking back over your time in business, and the life you've led, the process and visibility, right? All that writ large. In the before we started this recording, we're talking about your history with cardboard and so forth, going into Visio, and the process of it. So, what are your thoughts? How has this evolved over time, and is it a key part of business?
It is. I think the way I see it is, again, I came out of college and went to work at, Walmart in '86. It was all manual, right? You had a little template with some shapes cut out of it, and that's how you drew things. You literally drew it on paper. You thought through the process. You were designing, back then, even to an outcome, you were trying to achieve something. And as time moves on, well, they put that into an application called Visio. And so great, same concept, same everything, still thinking, still designing. But now software helped you do it, made it prettier. You could print them faster, started getting connectivity, right? You could do layers and layers of process mapping. And then we started to get some analytics behind it. And the thing about the analytics is, go back to the the manual process. We'd draw something, we'd implement it, we'd put it in. It'd be months, if not quarters, before you'd really see, did that process change? Because you were measuring it on a shop floor with pad and pencil. So as computers became more mainstream in the 90s and we really started to get some applications, we could get that measurement quicker. So the transparency of the effectiveness of your design and its implementation, we can measure, get quicker feedback, so we can make improvements, quicker. Well, now we arrive at a place where AI has taken on some of that design thinking. We're still involved, but we're involved less, and a lot more steps are completed without you. But it's instantaneous, the feedback, right? You can almost see things happening in front of you as to the impact you're making. That's the speed. Now, to get that speed, it's all connected. So everything had to get online and connected. Well, that brings about now where you're looking at is, how do we keep it safe? All that stuff we're doing is a competitive advantage, but it's not a competitive advantage if it's out on the internet every day for everybody to see and shared with your competitors. I think those things are what I worry about is how do we do everything we're doing, stay connected, start to work together closer around the security conversation, because there's no one company going to solve it. No one country is going to defeat it. It is going to take multiple people to step aside from their profits and gains and market shares and and to come together like we did for EDI, quick response and inventory. We set standards. We work together to make industries better and all benefited from it. I think that's where this process, this visibility, we got to turn our attention more to that. How do we bring the best of the best together?
Well, I like forcing functions, and you were the original executive sponsor of the Marine Living Research Center that's led to electric boats and so forth. And you talk about timing and visibility in business. You have this shrinking window of this competitive edge. I've always liked critical infrastructure because it sharpens the mind. It's very specific, very real, and there's nothing like maritime. I see AI right now that's smart enough to move boats around in a way that keeps them safe from storms, and that's a new thing. And that has on capital assets and insurance and everything else. But there's still a human in the loop. But I see, I'm looking at my bow window right now. You see the charter captains going by. These are human skills that are hard to find, and we are nowhere close to the point where AI can replace them, but we can inform them better, and we can have individuals with skills like that, or in corporations of any sort, who have more clarity, have more visibility, can make the human decisions faster. And if you're not doing that as a corporation of any sort, that's fine. Your competitors will, and they'll have lower costs and better customer satisfaction. And it's the kind of forcing function that, to your point, makes us get the best people together. When enough organizations and enough, whether they're public or private, find that things are changing, whether they like them or not, and there's a better way to do it, that's when we get standards and cooperation. So am I, I'm a Pollyanna optimist, you're a pragmatic realist, corporate executive. Are we really in that time right now? Global events from supply chain risk to international affairs, are they forcing us into what in the end maybe better efficiency, visibility, clarity?
I think the pandemic, for all that was, terrible and bad about it on human lives, it was a moment in time that forced us to realize that risk is not defined within an enterprise. It's not your corporation's risk. It's a connected global risk. And that's what the pandemic did. It showed us all of our weaknesses, it's a systemic risk across the globe that we just did not see, plan for, understand. This conflict between Russia and Ukraine, again, highlighting supply chain challenges of just energy, overdependence, poorly designed and thought through, policies and relationships that created a position for one country to have such dominant influence and power, right? To be an aggressor. These are the things I think that these events are bringing up, and now beginning to see that you can't design your contingency, your crisis management around your company. You're managing it through a complete ecosystem across the globe that you don't even probably touch. You don't even think about, but somewhere down the line or up the line, it's connected. And so I think it's broadened the horizon, and it's forcing us to think about relationships differently, our policies differently, what we consider valuable and how we leverage that, right, in business. And I think all those things are surfacing right now. Look, I just, I stepped down in November as the president and CEO of Unisys, and thought I was going to retire, didn't retire, just accepted a CEO job. And the very first thing as I took over this new company, and I've been there about 2 weeks now, kind of looking around, was supply chain. Because guess what? We have all these parts coming in and chips, and we're all dependent on it as a business now. So it's really heightened my awareness of how far behind we are on the transparency, the connectiveness, and just the real-time ability to shift and move to keep things moving. As much as we talk about all this technology, we're still there. We're still lagging. We're still lagging in the sophistication of its use and the transparency of what it can show us, so we can be better decision makers ahead of it.
Right. In my 30 years of doing this, right, I've seen a couple inflection points that all lead down this path. The one was the internet itself. How are we going to be out there connected to everybody else? It's like, well, you are already. And if you don't, that's fine. Your competitors will, right? And we know how that worked out. And here with supply chain visibility, we go back to 20 years ago, the late, great Jim Perenboon and colleagues at Argonne National Labs did a infrastructure connectedness study that today is a roadmap for this. You can't have power without water. You can't have water without power. There is no supply chain as such or infrastructure chain. It's all one big machine. Right. And if you can't see it, and one of the, before security and the internet for me was Windows, right? Going from Data General, classic RDOS, AOS systems, to Windows 2.0 and Linux. And it was File Explorer. It was, yes, I know the Linux commands, Unix commands, to find files, but typing them in all the time is not something that you're going to do or anybody in business is going to do. Just being able to go click, click, click. That's what gave us Microsoft. And we're in a world now with software supply chain, to your point about connectedness of parts and microchips and everything just inside a piece of code. It's kind of amazing how fast, once you fold that out and drill down the libraries and pieces, really, how many sources and do you know what they are? And we just went through this over the holidays with Log4j, a supply chain problem. And we've seen companies spend thousands of hours figuring that out. And I'm working with a company now that's doing things that allow you to, file explorer that. Click, click, click. There it is. Right. And it's the kind of change, whether it's good, for my company or the people doing this stuff right now, that to me speaks a lot about the future. Like in the future, if it's going to take you thousands of hours to find out where you put that $1 billion worth of code, you're probably not in business anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the transparency and function, everything, your whole experience, my whole life experience, transparency and clarity in business, is time, and time is money. Do you think this speaks to the future, and how strongly, in the window you and I care about the next couple of decades, do you think this typifies successful businesses, or am I overstating the importance of all this?
No, I don't think so. I still think it holds true. I was taught early on in business that you need to know three things about a business if you're going to be successful, and you need to know all three, right? You can't have two of the three, because that's a two-legged stool, and no two-legged stool stands. You've got to know how and what you're offering is contributing to your business, how your associates are contributing, and how your clients are contributing, right? And they all have to be contributing toward the goal. And I think that's that transparency, visibility. Now, you're getting instant feedback on several of those things already. But I think, set aside, the sophistication that we're getting to with like DBOM and, being able to really see blockchain and how we can use it and all these technology things. What did the pandemic teach us? There's still a core infrastructure problem with fulfilling the last mile of any supply chain. All those ships that sat out there for a month, still sitting there, waiting to dock, because we don't have an infrastructure to receive. We can't handle it. Our processes at the dock can't move things quick enough, right? And so all we're going to do is, if we're not careful, if we don't holistically see all the way through, is we're just going to get really, really fast, only to wait again, because we're not solving it all the way through. And so that, Chris, is what I would say is that just specific on supply chain. I think DBOM, all those things we have to go do. I want to know, look, we're shipping drugs around the world. There's things that are happening. I want to know where it came from. I want to know what batch it came from. I want to know that it's exactly what it's supposed to be. And at no point along the way did the temperature fail, right, in a cargo that compromised the drug, or that somebody substituted it. It got moved in and out, switched out. I think all that's vital to having integrity of coming together as a connected world. But again, we can't overlook the kind of basic infrastructure issues that all countries have in ports and highways. I mean, look, we can't even get enough drivers. Even we got all that stuff into the port and through customs. We don't have enough truck drivers. There was a shortage before the pandemic. Certainly there's a shortage today. So how does it even get to its end? That's all that stuff. So how do you get labor, truck driver status of companies, the open recs, all that stuff has to come together and be known and seen to have a guarantee that it gets from here to here in the time that it's needed. We have more work to do, and all of that work gets done and we don't secure it. We can't protect it, and it goes down on us. Like the threat the other day of being attacked on our electrical grid, it paralyzes decision-making. You don't want to be in that position. We have to be in a position to strengthen business and countries and governments. And the only way you do that is through security. Now, we used to use arms to do that, armed forces, missiles. Now we're getting into, it's all about, can you keep your electrical grid up? Can you keep the water supply flowing? Can you get energy when you need it? That's the sophistication of how security has have to evolve, right? Our thinking around it.
Well, I have a lot of faith in forces to drive us along. The drivers, that I keep mentioning, the competitive forces for corporate executives, and the visibility necessary to perform the tasks that we need as nations. This may be one of the cases where cyber, finally comes back and helps, the parent organization, the cardboard you talked about, my early career. And infrastructure, which, operations, the OT, operational technology, which is more mature than cyber writ large. But we're at this point with software where we're saying, you're going to tell me who touched the code. I'm going to write it into my corporate documents, from your seat, the executive seat, saying, you're not supplying me unless you give me this information, and we'll handle it appropriately. But I want to know who touched the code during your development process, not just the software bill of materials. But here's my business requirements for dealing with you. And we, to secure the software, we literally have to enable you, the decision makers, to demand that sort of visibility all the way down the software chain that in this case we don't have on the physical side. So maybe we're seeing some of that process happening in cyber that'll feed back into the rest of business.
Yeah, you hit on that. That's kind of a governance conversation. So let's take process and visibility, but now governance and its sophistication has to pick up. How companies govern, to your point, who's delivering what to them, how they're getting what they're getting, what are they signing on to, right? Because everything's as a service. Most companies are using cloud and platforms, but where's it going? Who has access? Who was developing the code that enabled that platform? I think you're spot on. And look, it's no big secret, right? Countries like China are very open. They're going to try and get as much information as they can, and that's what they do. And again, it's just their way of operating, and we're not going to change it. I hope it changes, but it won't in my lifetime. So how do we just accept that environment and then adopt all of these things? And governance is one that I think is just, again, lagging behind how sophisticated the things are happening around it and how slow we are to adapt to it. And I think look, unfortunately, that comes down to leadership, right? So if you have a legacy-minded leadership team who's living from what made them successful for the last 40 years, you're going to fail. The people and organizations that are going to succeed are the ones that learn, unlearn, and relearn. And they have to do that at such a rapid pace, it becomes the mindset. They build their company to encourage it, to enforce it, to reward it. But it's no longer the one that's been in the seat the longest or the best educated. It's the ones who can learn and unlearn and relearn at a pace that is acceptable to the changes in the environment around them.
Well, I don't think I could possibly pick a better ending than that. So with that, this has been a great time, Eric. Anytime. I appreciate all the time we've had together in the past. Look forward to more in the future. And thanks for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thanks, Chris, and safe boating out there.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.